Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network, a modern, innovative multimedia platform, broadcasting ideas and connecting minds. Every company has a story to tell, from the small startup to the large enterprise, and everything in between. This is one of them. We hope you enjoy this brand story conversation.
All right, here we are. We are coming to you from Las Vegas, Hacker Summer Camp, Black Hat. Here we are, Rupesh.
Yeah.
Good few days so far?
Yeah, great. Vegas, I'm here after few years.
That's right. Yeah, there was a little bit of a break, but good to be back in Vegas. Good to be at Black Hat, where there's a lot of research.
Yes.
A lot of information from organizations like your own to help us better understand what the threats are and how we can address them. And this is our second story with Akamai.
All right, very good.
Very good to have you back.
Thank you.
And I'm here obviously with Rupesh Chokshi. And Rupesh, maybe just an elevator pitch of what Akamai does, just kind of set the stage, and then we'll get into some of the specifics we want to touch on today.
Okay, sounds good. Yep. So Rupesh Chokshi, I run the application security business at Akamai. And if I raise it up, Akamai has multiple sort of, businesses, and it sort of was born as this innovative startup at the early days of the internet, right? And it was all about making the experiences of internet better. And now it's all about powering and protecting life, trillions of times a day in terms of just the volume and the data that we see. And the security space is where we are very focused on driving, growth for the business, but protecting the customers globally. And it is all about securing the applications, everywhere, every time. So that is where we are focused.
And no lack of applications being built. I think. Right. What is it? Every company is an app company now. If I'm not mistaken. That's one of the sayings. So you have your hands full there. Pretty much every sector you mentioned globally. Do you have customers that sit in multiple continents and everything?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the sectors and organizations that you work with?
Sure. So we definitely have global multinational companies that we serve, and it's very interesting to see how they all have their own sort of local needs, but they are also very global in nature. So for example, we serve the financial services sector, right? Majority of the banks are our customer, majority of the financial services, insurance companies, you name it. And then you take that sort of globally, and you have, European companies who are big banks are our customers. You go to Asia, APJ, the same. The commerce sector is very big for us. And then you start to kind of get into a lot of gaming, entertainment, right? So we are sort of the backbone that provides a lot of when you see the FIFA World Cup, or you see, in Asia Pac, cricket and other sports, NBA or NFL, etc. So we play a role in all of those. And
enabling and protecting.
Right? Yeah, that's the key. And with some of the newer things that we're focusing on with API security, we're expanding the vertical and the industry focus, right? Because when you start to think about APIs being sort of, the lifeline of the digital economy, you have healthcare companies or even manufacturing companies or industrials, everybody is starting to think about it in terms of what they need to do.
Yeah, and things like open banking, right? It's part of anything you can do now. Right?
Yes.
And so that's like API is basically our services embedded into other services, which may or may not be embedded in other things as well.
Right.
And certainly we have a supply chain, and all that stuff connects.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what you're seeing in terms of the growth of APIs. I was kind of joking, every company's an app company now. So they're building apps, they're using apps, they're connecting apps, right? They're working with their partners and exchanging the supply chain. If you look at automotive supply chain, it's all API driven, right?
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in terms of activity, traffic, and anything else related to that space?
explosive growth, right? Just the sheer, in all dimensions, right? So as you mentioned, every company is a technology company, every company is an app company, every company is focusing on innovations of experiences, right? If I'm, an automotive company, what's the experience that I want to do? If I'm a airline, what's the experience? If I'm a digital, commerce company, whatever, you name it, right? And underneath that, we are connecting with this whole supply chain, digital economy, hyper-connected with APIs. And the APIs are sort of the lifeline, the arteries, the connected tissue. So when you go to the enterprise and say, hey, how many do you have? And many times they don't even know. Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000? You have shadow APIs. So we see a lot of customers come to us and say, hey, just even help me catalog what I have. And then when we go and talk to them and say, hey, we publish the SOTI report, which is the State of the Internet report, and one of the ones that we did earlier, we, through our own data, found that 109%, so 109% increase in attacks on APIs year over year, right? Wow. So just the volume is there in terms of the data and the transactions, the APIs, and then you start to see the abuse and the attack surface also expand, and the number of attacks increase, right? So it becomes a very sort of ripe space for the bad guys and the hackers to go at, and we've seen some marquee brand names and customers in recent months have a big impact.
And can you share either or both what the attacks are after? Are they looking for accounts? Are they looking for data? Are they looking for access to other stuff? Are they looking to manipulate and I don't know, misinformation on social apps, or changing records for a banking app or whatever? What are some of the things you're seeing?
So I think it's a number of things, but let's do the most common things that we see is there's definitely a data breach, right? So what the attackers are doing is that they'll find an abuse in API, authenticate, unauthenticated type of information once they are penetrated into the enterprise system, right? So the API transactions are a method to sort of get in. And once they're in, what they're doing is just kind of bringing all of that data out, right? So they're going after, again, public information. You hear, T-Mobile, telephone mobile carrier had a breach, some 37 million records that they were able to trace back to API abuse. Recently, Dell was in the news, 49 million records, data breach, API abuse. So you start to see, big companies having to deal with that. So that's one. Then you start to get into, some of the hackers are more interested in sort of monetization, right? So you have a loyalty program or something like that. So they could go in and start to manipulate that and shift information or get points into a new account or buy something or utilize it. So we see a lot of financial fraud take place too, and some of it is like tens of thousands of dollars, but it's not just the dollar amount. If you think about you and I as consumers, right? We all flew in over here to Las Vegas. We're at Black Hat. We probably got some loyalty points on our airline. And a week from now, you wake up and you don't have your 100,000 miles, right? How would you the trust? Right. The fact that you are trusting the enterprise or the company or the brand that you're working with is sort of like compromised. You also see a lot of financial related abuse where money is moved and all of that. One example I'll give you was very interesting. What the hackers did is that they went to this sort of, television service company, and they did a
streaming service? Or?
Yeah, like a satellite provider, right? Yeah. And they did a carding attack. So what they were doing was just going in, utilizing the APIs, the transactions, to validate the tens of thousands of stolen credit cards that they had. So they're not taking anything away from that business, but now they know which cards are active that they can misuse somewhere else. Now, this business is now part of this process, right? Which is unfortunate that nothing was stolen from them, but they are now an accessory to what happened. So there are so many different angles, right, that the bad guys have figured out how to monetize, how to utilize, And they keep, folks like myself and my team and others, on the toe, right? Because we're trying to figure out, what's the next area of attack? What's the detection? How do we go about it? What does that armor look like? Do you focus on discovery, posture, runtime, and so many, more things to do. One of the examples that we are working on is API testing, which is saying that let us go upstream, right, to the developer and say, before you deploy the code or before you deploy the API, let me test it. And I can tell you what are the known vulnerabilities and exposures and authentication issues or attacks, and utilize all of that to make what you have much more foolproof, right? And then we'll still protect you in runtime, but at least what you're pushing out is a lot more secure by design, right? And that is, again, a lot to do, a lot happening in this space, and we are just every day working with our customers.
So on that point, so many moons ago, I did some of that testing for a vendor actually, back in the NLM days. But it was about testing the limits, testing the inputs and the outputs, testing what it should and shouldn't do, and not just itself, but in the bigger picture as well. And so how can let's speak to the CISOs for a moment, because you mentioned they don't know how many APIs are being used, so it's difficult for them to even begin tackling this problem. So do you find that they're working with the app dev teams and the SecOps teams to secure what they have at least, and then they're just hoping the other stuff doesn't surface? So talk to me about how they approach this problem and how they then work with you and the team at Akamai to reinforce and make it more robust.
So, as you mentioned, the number one challenge that we see for the CISOs is just the ability to even have a catalog, right? Like, I want to know what type of APIs for what type of apps. Is there something that is user web facing? Is there something B2B? Is there something internal? Do I have shadow? What all do I have? Which ones are dormant? Which ones are active? A lot of questions. And it's unfortunate, but in the field of IT, you also have a lot of developer churn and people churn, right? And the best of the developers are not the best keepers of their notes, right? They don't document everything, etc. So the CISO doesn't even know where to start. So when we work with them, it's first about discovery. So let us help you catalog. Let's help you discover, right? Some of it we can do from the data flow. Some of it we have scanning capabilities. Some of it we can see, these things are happening in the production environment. Did you know about it, etc. So we're able to kind of bring all of that, internal, external, and catalog it and discover. And then, we can take the intelligence that we have from a threat perspective, vulnerability perspective, and provide posture. As I said, how many of these things
the
are...
exposures,
And what do you need to do about it? Is this something you need to, immediately focus on, or you have a little bit of time to figure that out? So that is where, bulk of it. And I think what is going to start to happen is that there will be more and more governance type of need, right? Which is even internal to the organization. How are we going to manage all of these things? What is the cataloging? What is even the record? What is a single truth to all of it, right? And
does that sit under the CISO at the moment, primarily?
I think so, because I think now it is, the CISO would say, hey, I can only protect what I know, right? So if I don't even know, right? If my teams don't even fully understand, I shared this thing with somebody the other day, is that if you went to a CISO of a large enterprise and say, hey, here's a laptop that's part of your network and you don't know about it, would they allow that? No, right? They're so focused on endpoint security, every laptop, every person, every cell phone, anything that connects to their network, they want to know.
For people and systems.
Right. Now, what if that laptop was an API, right? Would you allow that? Right now, you don't know. And the APIs are, in fact, designed to communicate externally.
Never cross inside,
Right. So the risk factors that are involved are very, explicit, very massive. The threat landscapes are very different. The classic perimeter thinking cannot, like the firewalls, all of that cannot protect, right? Because you might say, hey, I'm going to put a firewall and anything that goes in and out is through the firewall. But you have so many apps, so many interactions that are designed to go in and out. And we live in a hyper-connected supply chain economy, right?
So what are some of the signs? Let's assume for a moment there's a false sense of security. We think we have, I know you said they tell you explicitly they don't have a complete view.
Right.
But we think we have a view of the stuff that matters most. Mm-hmm. Let's make that assumption for a moment. Right. What can they do? They're not quite ready to engage with a full discovery process. Are there any signals or signs that can trigger them to say, I have something I need to dig deeper into here, and I need to call Rupesh and team?
So I think a lot of times, when you start to think about business logic abuse, you start to see some of that they can internally start to see, right? I mean, the example of the rewards program or loyalty program, that customer was sort of like sensing there's something not right here, but they were not able to figure out what was there. And the moment we deployed the API security solution and we showed how certain APIs were being abused for certain type of information flow, what was going out, it all started to come together, right? And that is where I think it's important, right? So they might be sensing that there's something not 100% right. Now the fear with APIs is that, a lot of the customers don't feel comfortable blocking their transactions, right? Because think of the intensity of the transactions.
Oh yeah.
It's happening so fast, right?
Yeah. And well, that's usually the business, right?
Right.
It's a customer being onboarded or a transfer of money going or something.
Something happening, right? Let's take an example of, hey, you're booking a ride share on the app, right? There's like so many transactions are happening in the back. Yeah. And many of them are API centric, and you don't want to block it. You're concerned. But you want to know if there is something wrong happening, and how do you figure that out? So a lot of the threat research and what we focus on is the data telling me something? Am I seeing certain patterns? We also have a lot of client reputation or IP reputation. So we know which IPs are good, which IPs are bad, because we see a bulk of the traffic on the internet. So you take some of those intelligence and you can say, okay, if something is being abused from a bad IP, then there's a very high probability that the hackers and the adversaries are breaking in.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff you can see outside the organization. Some of you have to be inside.
Right.
In the last moment we have here, the value of the data you see across all your customers.
Yeah.
Both publicly and working with them. How does that help you then have a more informed conversation to help the CISO and their teams understand? Because we're talking about multiple teams here, right?
Yeah.
DevOps and all the others.
Yeah.
Get a sense of here's how we should move forward.
Yeah. No, that's a great point and question, Sean, which is, at Akamai, we see tremendous amount of data, right? We see majority of the transactions taking place on the internet. We see the enterprise inside data. And what we are doing is two things. So one is some of this data is utilized by our threat research and the AI ML models that we have to learn, right, in terms of what is happening. We have bot mitigation models where we can identify which ones are human being related transactions or bots are coming in and buying sneakers or trade. I mean, they go buy tickets to a big event or something like that, right? So we're able to do that, have the AI models, do that. And then when we have the conversations with the customers, we're able to show them time series, right? Look, this is what happened. The hackers came, the bots came, the attackers came. They tried to penetrate over here. These places they were able to get through, these places they were not able to get through. What's the next layer of defense? How do you do defense in depth? All of that, right? And the data helps, tell that story, gives the confidence.
Yeah. It's all about the story.
Yeah.
And the story's in the data.
Stories in the data.
Stories in the data.
And the other advantage we have is that we're also able to see sort of, within the, let's say the vertical, right? So let's say the financial services, right? So if I'm seeing a layer 7 attack or a DDoS attack on bank A, right? I can go make sure bank B, C, D, right. E, F, G are more protected. Are they kind of in the right posture? Because sometimes we see the adversaries hit up the entire sector.
Yep.
And we're seeing more and more of that with infrastructure too, right? We're seeing more and more with operational technology companies, right? Oil company, manufacturing company, infrastructure.
Well, they're just coming up to speed on all this stuff as well.
Right,
so
right.
They need that insight.
Yes, yeah.
Well, amazing, Rupesh. I appreciate chatting with you and getting to meet you in person here in Las Vegas.
Great, thank you.
Always happy to have a chat with the Akamai team, and hopefully, if you're here in Vegas still, if you're listening to this and it's still Vegas week at Black Hat, be sure to stop by the booth and say hi to Rupesh, and if not, connect with him online, visit the directory page, and there will be resources as well as part of the show notes. So
great.
You can learn more about Akamai and all the API goodness that they provide and everything else that enable and protect businesses that we all probably use at some point.
Yeah. Great. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks,
Please.
everybody. Thanks, Rupesh.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and that you will come back for more brand stories on ITSP Magazine. If you want to share your company's brand story, go to itspmagazine.com and explore our advertising options to learn more. Remember to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues, and stay tuned for more brand stories as we continue our journey toward redefining cybersecurity, technology, and society.